Today is the 16th day of the month of Kislev. We are finishing off chapter 28, discussing the laws of Torah scrolls and other holy books. That will be going from paragraph 11 through the end of the chapter, paragraph 13. We will also begin chapter 29, which discusses the laws of middos, proper character traits. And in chapter 29, we'll be doing paragraphs 1 through 3. So back to chapter 28, paragraph 11. If you see a non-Jew selling tefillin, mezuzahs, Torah scrolls, of course, any such holy object, so there's a mitzvah to buy it from them. Even if it's worn out, there's a mitzvah to buy it so that you could bury it, so it will be treated properly instead of just being discarded into the garbage. However, you have to make sure that you're not overpaying for it, because there's always a concern, how would a non-Jew end up having a Torah scroll or tefillin? Likely they didn't get it in such an honest way, or somebody else didn't get it in such an honest way and then sold it to them. So there's a concern that if you pay for more than market value, then whichever way these tefillin or Torah scrolls were gotten, whichever dishonest way presumably, then whoever stole it will try getting more Torah scrolls or tefillin, will steal more. And therefore we have to make sure to never pay more than what they're actually worth. You go slightly above the value, but nothing too much over the value. Now, if you end up bargaining with him, says the Kislev, you have to be careful that you're doing it in a respectful way, because if he gets upset because to the non-Jew it doesn't mean anything, if he gets upset at you, he might just destroy it just to get you upset, and that would obviously be a horrible thing. Paragraph 12. If God forbid a Torah scroll falls on the floor, then anyone who saw it fall has to fast. If this ever happens, make sure to speak to a rabbi, because how to fast, how long you have to fast, are details that are beyond the scope of our discussion, but are very important, and it's obviously a very scary thing if a Torah scroll falls on the floor. Paragraph 13. The Kislev says here a unique halacha, which is that if somebody is writing a pasuk, a verse from the Torah, on parchment, then you have to put in sirtut, which sirtut are lines. If you ever look in a Torah scroll or in tefillin or inside a mezuzah scroll from a mezuzah, you'll see there are lines etched into the parchment paper. So if you're writing a verse on parchment paper, you have to have those etched lines there. Now, it seems like this might be a problem or might be necessary, even if it's not parchment paper, anytime you're writing up a verse from the Torah. However, the Mishnah Berurah says that if you're writing verses from the Torah to learn from them, then we don't have to be worried about this. But we shouldn't be writing down verses from the Torah just randomly on pieces of paper if it's not needed. Chapter 29. Middos, character traits that we are supposed to strive to develop. Paragraph 1. The Kislev gives an introduction to character traits. He's really quoting Maimonides in this paragraph, and he talks about different character traits that human beings have. For example, some examples that he gives are some people are very calm always. They have a calm disposition. Some people get angry easily. You have some people who are extremely humble. Other people will be extremely haughty. Some people are overindulgent in materialistic types of stuff, while other people naturally don't have a strong interest in materialism. Some people are really stingy, others are extremely generous, and so on and so forth. Paragraph 2. What's the best way for someone to live? What's the proper way to have all these character traits? Says the Kislev, quoting Maimonides, the Rambam again, that the best way is to go in the derech emtsai, the middle path, the middle of the road, not too extreme on either side. For example, someone shouldn't overly indulge in the physical world and in their physical, taking care of their body. Spend all day 24/7 working out, making sure that they're totally buff. However, they have to make sure also that they are taking care of their body, that they are exercising properly, that they're not neglecting their body. One should make sure that they're not stingy, that they're not tight-fisted. On the other hand, they should make sure they're not just giving away money too easily. When we give tzedakah, it has to be with calculation, where the right place to give to is, how much to give to the right place. Should we be giving somebody money, lending them money? There has to be a thought involved. It can't just be just giving out everything. So it's this balancing act. We have to make sure to not be too frivolous or lightheaded. But on the other hand, we have to make sure that we're not too depressed or serious. It's, again, this middle of the road path. This is the general rule for most character traits, choosing the middle road. Paragraph 3. Says the Kislev that there are some exceptions to that middle of the road rule. The first exception is arrogance. Being arrogant is such a horrible character trait that we have to supposed to try to totally obliterate it. Now, there's a difference between being arrogant and not being a pushover. We're able to stand our ground without being arrogant. And sometimes we're supposed to stand our ground. We're not supposed to be a pushover. But at the same time being humble. So how do we work on diminishing any arrogance that we might have? Says the Kislev, let's start with people who are maybe smarter than us. If they're smarter than us, then it makes sense for us to be humble. This person who I'm talking to, I'm dealing with, is much wiser than I am. So, it makes sense to be humble. If I'm dealing with somebody who's wealthier than I am, also in Judaism, the fact that somebody is wealthy doesn't mean they're always right, but we do give a certain respect to somebody who's wealthy, who has a certain standing in the community. So again, if I'm dealing with somebody who's wealthier than I am, there's reason to be humble. Now let's say we're dealing with somebody who's less wealthy than I am and who's less wise than I am. Says the Kislev, what do you do then? What's the perspective then? So then he says, what the perspective is? Probably he's a bigger tzaddik, he's more righteous than I am. Because of his less wisdom and his less wealth than I have, then if he commits a sin, if he does something wrong, it's probably due to lack of knowledge, lack of resources. However, if I do something wrong, then it's with my wisdom, with my resources, I'm still doing something wrong. If I do the same thing wrong as him, it's much worse if I do it wrong because of my resources and my wisdom. Therefore, this person who I'm dealing with now, who's not as wise as I am, is not as wealthy as I am, he's probably a bigger tzaddik, he's probably more of a righteous person than I am. And if we think like that, that will help us work on our character trait, on our midah of being humble. This concludes today's episode. Have a wonderful day and see you tomorrow.